Distinguished guests, Australian and French families, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the Anzac Day dawn service at the Australian National Memorial in Villers-Bretonneux, northern France. Good morning and good afternoon also to those who may be watching this broadcast back home in cities and towns across Australia and around the world. Playing the didgeridoo this morning was Flight Lieutenant James Evans of the Royal Australian Air Force. James is a proud Wiradjuri man from Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. My name is Lieutenant Colonel François Nazik, and it is my great privilege to be your Master of Ceremonies today. A mere few kilometres from this site, Lieutenant Lindsay Robert Turner was woken up just after 4 a.m. on the 24th of April 1918 by a continued roar punctuated by a deafening crash every few minutes. He wrote in his diary, "I listened spellbound by what I concluded to be my first experience of an Allied barrage. It lasted fully 2 hours. 4 o'clock must have been 0 hour." Lieutenant Turner might in fact have heard the opening salvos of the German attack on Villers-Bretonneux, never realising that he was listening to the early moments of a battle that remains one of Australia's most storied actions of the First World War. Here, in this very special place, in the Somme region of France, over 100 years ago, Australian troops recaptured the town of Villers-Bretonneux that had just hours before fallen into German hands. In a ferocious counterattack, driving the Germans from their positions and denying them a route to the vital rail junction in Amiens, the Australians won an important victory. By the morning of the 3rd anniversary of the landings at Gallipoli, Villers-Bretonneux was back in Allied hands. Villers-Bretonneux quickly became one of Australia's most well-known battles of the First World War. The swift counterattack impressed all who witnessed it. Those who had believed it could not succeed were relieved. But like every Western Front action, whether it ended in defeat or victory, the toll was high. Some 1,500 Australians were killed or wounded at Villers-Bretonneux, their families at home left to mourn the dead and wait the news of survivors. Those who lost their lives were among the more than 46,000 Australians who died on the Western Front. Veterans who served in this theatre of the war would never forget, and Australia has not forgotten. On this day, we honour them, and we honour the bond between Australia and France, which has endured for more than a century. We begin this morning's service with the mounting of the catapult party. Please stand.
Animal party! Quick! March! Animal party! Praise and arms! Animal party! Brave us! Animal party! Slow! Carnival party, rest on!
Please be seated. I now invite Her Excellency Ms. Gillian Bird, Australian Ambassador to France, to deliver the welcome.
As we gather here at dawn at this hallowed site, it is my honor to welcome you all. To those who have come from near and those who have traveled from far to honor ancestors, family, and loved ones, I welcome you. Let me also acknowledge the Honorable Matt Keogh, Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defense Personnel, Monsieur Roland Michel Blaiseau, Préfet de la Somme, Lieutenant General Simon Stewart, Chief of the Australian Army, General Pierre Schill, Chef d'État-Major de l'Armée de Terre, Mesdames et Messieurs, les parlementaires et les élus, Mesdames et Messieurs, les membres du corps diplomatique, Mesdames et Messieurs, les membres actifs des forces armées et anciens combattants. Chaque année, à l'occasion de l'Anzac Day, nous commémorons les débarquements de 1915 sur la péninsule de Gallipoli, où le courage et l'héroïsme du corps d'armée des Anzac se sont pleinement révélés lors du premier anniversaire du débarquement. Lors des premiers anniversaires du débarquement, les Australiens, aussi bien chez eux qu'à l'étranger, ont organisé des commémorations rendant hommage aux soldats tombés au front. Et c'est ainsi qu'a débuté cette tradition qui perdure encore aujourd'hui. C'est ici en France et au nord dans les Flandres que les soldats australiens combattant aux côtés des troupes françaises, britanniques et alliées ont affronté l'armée allemande sur le champ de bataille pour la première fois. The Anzacs, on arriving to these fields and villages, had seen this country as a welcome change from the sand and heat of their camp outside Cairo. Here were lush green pastures, dotted with picturesque homes and hamlets. When the troops set up camp, they were so far behind the lines that at times the guns could not be heard. All too soon, the stillness of peace was shattered by the horrors of war. Nowhere are we more starkly reminded of those horrors than here at Villers-Bretonneux, for etched on the walls of this sober memorial are the names of almost 11,000 Australians, many still in their teens, who lost their lives in France but have no known grave. Sur le front occidental, la guerre rendit familier les noms des villes et des villages français, jusque-là inconnus en Australie. Les Australiens reconnaissaient désormais les noms de Fromelles, Pozières, Boulcourt, Le Hamel, Amiens, Villers-Bretonneux, Perron, Mont-Saint-Quentin et une myriade d'autres lieux où leurs compatriotes avaient combattu et péri. Associés à jamais à la dernière demeure de ceux qui avaient fait le sacrifice ultime, ces noms faisaient désormais partie de l'Australie autant que de la France, forgeant ainsi des liens indélébile entre nos deux pays. Malheureusement, ce ne fut pas la seule guerre mondiale que la France endura au cours du XXe siècle. En juin de cette année, nous commémorons le 80e anniversaire du débarquement sur les côtes normandes. Au cours de cette guerre également, les troupes australiennes et françaises combattirent côte à côte pour de nobles causes, celle de la liberté et de la démocratie. Une fois de plus, le prix de la liberté fut payé par le sang, racheté uniquement par la bravoure de ceux qui sacrifièrent leur vie pour que d'autres puissent vivre. As we look at the walls of this memorial, we remember the fallen and mourn their loss. We remember, too, the many thousands who were grievously injured, bearing scars in body and mind that time could neither heal nor salve. And this year, as every year, we honor the tradition of service they founded, a tradition that takes on different meanings with each new generation who serve in war and conflict around the globe. Their courage, selflessness, and sacrifices gave us the freedom and liberty we enjoy today. As the great Australian historian Charles Bean wrote in his Anzac Requiem, our servicemen and women have left us a splendid heritage. May we and our successors prove worthy of their sacrifice. Lest we forget, n'oublions jamais.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now invite Australia's Chief of Army, Lieutenant General Simon Stewart, to deliver the call to remembrance.
For more than 2 years, Australian soldiers fought in this part of northern France and in nearby Flanders. Tens of thousands lost their lives, many within a few kilometres of this memorial before which we gather this morning. Each year, on Anzac Day, we honour all Australians who have served. We remember the dead of the First World War and the fallen of all the wars and conflicts in which Australians have been involved since 1914. No theatre of war has seen Australian sacrifice on such a terrible scale as the Great War's Western Front. Among the many who lie in the cemeteries that trace the course of the fighting through France and Belgium is Private George Burns of Jerilderie in New South Wales. A few weeks before his death in action, Private Burns shared the impressions of the battle. When I look back on that wild night and later when death stared us in the face, I wonder how I escaped the fate of so many who fell in no man's land. I will try to give you some idea of what that week was like. We were ordered to prepare for something more serious than ordinary trench work. Then we were sent up to the front and manned the parapet opposite the point that we were to attack. The men stood side by side with fixed bayonets, waiting for the word to go forward. Some whispered, others made jokes in high-strung voices, others laughed. At last, the order was given, and we went over the parapet together, rushing forward in a line across no man's land. The artillery on both sides thundered, The area was lit up with bursting shells and shafts of flame, while shrapnel fell in showers. The courage of our boys was sublime. Nothing else but success mattered. My own ideas of the charge are misty. I have vague memories of men with staring eyes bulging out of their sockets, with set faces racing toward the German trenches, of falling men, of agonising cries, but nothing that seems real. All that I know is that we reached the German trenches, captured them, and swept on. We congratulated ourselves on a cheap victory, but alas, we knew not what the future was to bring forth. On the following day, the enemy artillery opened up on us, and the days that followed are to me glimpses of what hell must surely be. Shell after shell roared and shrieked over our heads. Soon the range shortened, and the heavy shells began to drop nearer, throwing up tons of earth high into the air, covering us with dirt and debris. Many were killed or buried uninjured by a single shell, and many expired from suffocation before they could be dug out. Hour by hour, we sat in our trenches, which had become mere shambles, waiting for what? Nothing more or less than death. Each felt that his turn would surely come. I try to forget what I've seen, to get away from the awful mental torture I've endured, to pray for a great peace where such maelstroms of agony and death will be no more. On the 5th of November 1916, Private Burns was reported missing, later to be declared killed. He was buried at Grevillers. George Burns was an ordinary man, a railway porter before enlisting. He left civilian life behind, never to return home. This Anzac Day, we honour all who have served in the uniform of Australia's armed forces. And we remember all who have lost their lives.
Thank you, sir. I now invite the Honourable Matt Keogh, Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel, to deliver this morning's first commemorative address.
As the dawn breaks in Australia, around the world, and here in France, we gather to remember. We remember all who have served in Australia's name and all those who never returned home. Of the 330,000 Australians who served in the First World War, more than 60,000 lost their lives, many of whom lie eternal here on the Western Front, our most deadly theatre of war. One of those, who lies in Underhill Farm Cemetery, a couple of hours from here, is Private Victor James McCarthy. Victor enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in August 1916 while working in a brewery in Kalgoorlie, Western Australia. Victor trained at home and abroad before joining the 48th Battalion on the 23rd of June 1917, while he was en route to Plug Street in Belgium. Just 3 weeks later, Victor was killed in heavy shelling about 5 kilometres behind the front lines. He had just marked his 20th birthday. Private Victor James McCarty was my grandmother's cousin. Like me, many of you share a connection to the Australian Imperial Force of the First World War. On this peaceful morning, it's hard to believe that the fields surrounding us were the scene of such intense fighting and bloodshed during the Battle of Villers-Bretonneux 106 years ago. At dawn on the 24th of April, the Germans attacked and captured the town of Villers-Bretonneux. That night, Australian troops responded, leading a successful counterattack that liberated the town the following morning on the 3rd anniversary of the Anzac landing at Gallipoli. General John Monash considered the attack the finest thing yet done in the war by Australians or any other troops, while Lord William Birdwood said this action was the great turning point of the war. That was the beginning of the special and enduring relationship Australia shares with the people of Villers-Bretonneux, and we are grateful that you continue to preserve the memory and sacrifice of our service personnel each Anzac Day. The beautiful memorial behind me lists the names of almost 11,000 personnel who were killed on the Western Front and whose bodies were never recovered or who have no known grave. One of those names is Lance Corporal Albert Tickley. Albert lived in Armidale in my local community, working in the timber industry. He enlisted in September 1915, and after initial training at home and in Egypt, he arrived in France in June 1916 with the 48th Battalion. During the infamous Battle of Pozieres, with little regard for his own safety, Albert carried wounded men more than 400 metres back to their own trenches under heavy machine gun fire, receiving a wound in the thigh. Albert was awarded the Military Medal for his bravery. On 11 April 1917, Albert's mates recalled seeing him badly wounded in the trenches as he took part in the First Battle of Bullecourt. Initially reported as missing, he was later confirmed as killed in action. Albert was just 27 years of age. His body was never recovered. The original Anzacs helped shape who we are as Australians. The values they displayed on the battlefields, courage, selflessness, endurance, loyalty, and mateship have been passed down to generation after generation of Australian service personnel. Values displayed in more recent times in Afghanistan, Iraq, Timor-Leste, and in peacekeeping operations underway right now. The impact of service is significant, and for many, the war within continues long after someone hangs up their uniform for the last time. This is not just a burden for our veterans, but for their families too. Today, on Anzac Day, we pay tribute to more than 2 million Australians who have served our nation and its allies in all wars, conflicts, and peacekeeping operations. We also acknowledge the sacrifice of their families. We remember the service and sacrifice of people like Victor and Albert, who will forever lay in foreign soil, and more than 103,000 Australians who have lost their lives in Australia's name, lest we forget.
Thank you, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join the Royal Australian Air Force Band in singing the hymn, Abide With Me. Please be seated. J'invite maintenant Monsieur Roland Mouchel-Blaiseau, préfet de la Somme, à prononcer le second discours de commémoration.
Monsieur le ministre australien des anciens combattants et du personnel de défense, Madame l'ambassadrice d'Australie en France, Monsieur le chef de l'armée de terre australienne, Monsieur le chef d'état-major de l'armée de terre française, Madame et Messieurs les parlementaires, Monsieur le président du conseil départemental, Monsieur le maire de Villers-Bretonneux, Mesdames, Messieurs les élus, Ladies and Gentlemen, Mesdames, Messieurs. Aujourd'hui, j'ai l'honneur, comme représentant du gouvernement français, de commémorer avec vous l'Anzac Day. C'est personnellement ma 4e cérémonie et ma première en France, puisque j'ai eu le grand honneur de participer à 3 d'entre elles quand j'étais en poste en Australie. Permettez-moi de vous souhaiter la bienvenue dans la Somme, cette terre qui a été témoin de grandes batailles durant la Première Guerre mondiale. Je voudrais aussi exprimer mes vœux de bienvenue les plus chaleureux pour la délégation australienne. I would like to welcome more specifically the Honourable Mr. McKeown, Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel, and all the Australians and New Zealanders we came from far away to be with us for this early morning dawn service. I have great acquaintance with Australia, as I had the opportunity to serve as French consul in Melbourne. While there, for the 80th anniversary of Armistice Agreement, I had the privilege to hand the Legion of Honour at the Parliament House in Melbourne to 5 diggers who fought in the surrounding here. This was a memorable moment I will never forget. Le 25 avril 1918, à l'heure même et à l'endroit précis où nous sommes réunis ce matin, des combats acharnés opposaient les soldats britanniques et australiens à l'armée allemande. Depuis 1938, cette cérémonie permet aux Australiens, aux Alliés, aux Français de renouer avec la douloureuse mémoire de cette guerre. Elle nous permet d'honorer les hommes et les femmes qui se sont battus, ainsi que les familles qui perpétuent aujourd'hui encore leur mémoire. Le sacrifice de ces jeunes gens engagés, dont un grand nombre ne sont jamais rentrés chez eux, nous rappelle le coût humain de cette guerre. 295 000 soldats australiens furent engagés sur le front occidental, 132 000 y furent blessés, 46 000 y périrent. Nous ne nous les oublierons jamais, let's we forget. Ici, le 25 avril 1918, les Australiens stoppèrent l'avancée de l'armée allemande et cette victoire redonnait courage et espoir à tous ces soldats épuisés par la violence, l'inhumanité et la durée du conflit. Le 4 juillet, le général Sir John Monash, un formidable ingénieur et logisticien, dirigea ensuite une offensive victorieuse à Le Hamel, opération décisive dans la bataille de la Somme. La France, les Français, savent ce que nous devons à chacun d'entre eux. Lorsque les Français évoquent les Anzac, c'est aujourd'hui encore pour rappeler leur courage et exprimer leur reconnaissance. Lorsque j'étais consul général de France à Melbourne, on me parlait avec émotion de la Somme, dont les noms des villages martyrs, vous l'avez rappelé, Madame l'ambassadeur, ornent les monuments aux morts partout en Australie. Cette mémoire, je peux en mesurer toute l'étendue depuis mon arrivée dans la Somme, du mémorial de Pozières aux inscriptions présentes sur les murs de la cité souterraine de Naour, sans oublier le pont de l'amitié, le Friendship Bridge, que nous avons inauguré hier avec vous, Monsieur le ministre, à Amiens. Tout ceci, parmi d'autres, sont des témoignages omniprésents de l'engagement des soldats australiens sur le sol français lors de la Première Guerre mondiale. En scellant leur destin à celui de la France, les Australiens ont fait de la Première Guerre mondiale le socle d'une mémoire partagée entre la jeune nation fédérée en 1905 que devenait l'Australie et la nôtre. Et c'est un devoir pour les élus et les habitants de la Somme de veiller sur les tombes de connus ou inconnus, de ceux qui vous sont chers, qui se sont sacrifiés pour notre liberté, et de vous accueillir avec grand plaisir et reconnaissance chaque année pour poursuivre cette histoire commune. Dans un monde tourmenté et plein de violence, l'amitié franco-australienne vit et rayonne bien au-delà du champ de bataille. Chers amis australiens, nous savons que le sport est l'âme de votre très grand pays. Nous avons à cet égard été très touchés que l'équipe australienne de rugby vienne ici se recueillir dans ce magnifique mémorial en arrivant pour disputer la Coupe du monde de rugby, the Rugby World Cup, il y a quelques mois. Un grand événement sportif nous attend aussi cet été en France. As you know, Paris and the rest of France are organizing the Olympic and Paralympic Games. The whole country will be united to make it a great sport event. Just before, on the 4th of July, the Olympic torch will pass through this memorial, a unique place full of hope and coming to life again. We will be glad to welcome all the Australian, New Zealanders, and visitors coming from down under, as you say, during this event. Les rugbyman ont payé d'ailleurs un lourd tribut. We say footy in Australia. 5000 se sont engagés, 500 ont été tués, à l'image de William Tasker, qui repose ici, dans ce mémorial, et le passage de la torche olympique dans ces lieux remplis d'histoire sera très symbolique. We wish good luck to all the Australian sportsmen and women. Good luck also for the French athletes. May you succeed in an atmosphere of friendship and openness to others. In one word, liberté, égalité, fraternité. Vive l'Australie, vive la France.
Je vous remercie pour vos mots, Monsieur le Préfet. I now invite Principal Chaplain Andrew Lewis of the Royal Australian Navy to lead us in a prayer of commemoration.
In times of reflection, people of faith normally include prayer. If this is you, I invite you to join me in praying. Otherwise, may these words be edifying as you reflect this Anzac dawn. Loving God, help us this day to remember the sacrifice of all who gave their lives and their futures in defence of their home, their families, their loved ones, and their nation. We remember and thank them for the peace and security they strived to bring to these lands. We continue to remember and give thanks for those who have served our nations. We thank the families who allow their children, their loved ones, their parents to leave them to serve our great countries. We acknowledge and give thanks for the sacrifices families make so that our defence members may serve and protect us. We remember those who in time of war and conflict faithfully serve their country. We pray for those whose loved ones have paid the ultimate price in serving their country, those who laid down their lives to give us the freedoms we have today. We grieve with those who still mourn the loss of loved ones. Help us to remember and care for those who still bear the physical, spiritual, and emotional scars and disabilities of their service. Make us a people zealous for peace, and hasten that day when nation shall not lift up sword against nation. May your grace enable us this day to dedicate ourselves to the cause of justice, freedom, and peace, and grant us the wisdom and strength to build a better world. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Padre. Wreaths will now be laid by official representatives in the following order. To acknowledge the bond between Australia and France, the first wreaths will be laid jointly by the Honourable Matt Keogh, Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel, and Monsieur Roland Michel-Blaiseau, Préfet de la Somme. The next reads will be laid by His Excellency Mr. Yunus Demir on behalf of the Republic of Turkey, Brigadier General Matibeli Lepiane on behalf of the Republic of South Africa, and Brigadier Alistair Veach on behalf of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The next reads will be laid by Colonel Michel Hubrecht on behalf of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Captain Aaron Hoff on behalf of the United States of America, Mr. Michael Tierney on behalf of the Republic of Ireland, and Mr. John Desroisier on behalf of Canada. The next reads will be laid by Madame Ingrid Dodin, Députée de la Somme, and Monsieur Emmanuel Maquet, Député de la Somme. The next reads will be laid by Monsieur Laurent Saumon, Sénateur de la Somme, and Monsieur Rémy Cardon, Sénateur de la Somme. The next reads will be laid by Madame Anne Pinon, représentant Monsieur Xavier Bertrand, Président du Conseil régional des Hauts-de-France, Monsieur Stéphane Osselier, Président du Conseil départemental de la Somme, and the Honourable Luke Edmonds, representing the Premier of Tasmania. The next wreaths will be laid on behalf of the Australian Defence Force and French Armed Forces by Lieutenant General Simon Stewart, Chief of Army, Général d'Armée Pierre Chili, Chef d'État-Major de l'Armée de Terre, et Général Olivier Côté, Commandant de la Région de Gendarmerie des Hauts-de-France. The next wreaths will be laid by Monsieur Yves Ducroc, maire de Fouillois, Monsieur Didier Dinoir, maire de Villers-Bretonneux, et Monsieur Stéphane Chevin, maire de Le Hamel, représentant le président de la communauté des communes du Val-de-Saône. The final wreaths will be laid by Miss Claire Horton on behalf of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, Mr Rodney Bedford on behalf of the Royal British Legion, and Major Peter Williams on behalf of the Returned and Services League of Australia. It is now time to silently reflect and remember all those who have served and died in the service of their nations. Please stand for the Ode and the Acte de Souvenir, which will be followed by the last post, 1 minute of silence and reveille. The Ode will be recited by Warrant Officer Kim Felmingham of the Australian Defence Force. The Acte de Souvenir will be recited by Lieutenant Colonel Jean-Marc Sapé of the French Armed Forces.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. Ils ne vieilliront pas, contrairement à nous qui aurons cette chance.